I stood at the podium, the lights of the auditorium blazing down on me, 1,000 eyes fixed on my face, a million more watching through the live stream. My heart thudded like a drum inside my chest. In my hands, the glass award glittered, a symbol of victory, but also a weapon I'd waited my whole life to wield. The screen behind me flashed my photo, the words Dr. Emily Carter, Neurosurgeon of the Year, glowing in bold letters. Cameras flashed. People rose to their feet, clapping. But my eyes weren't on the crowd. They were on two figures standing far at the back, wearing faded uniforms, the hospital cleaner and the gardener. My hands trembled as I lifted the microphone. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head, but now that it had come, it felt surreal. My name, I began, my voice shaking yet steady, is Dr. Emily Carter. But that's not the name I was born with. Gasps filled the room. I saw the two at the back stiffen. 25 years ago, I said, my parents abandoned me at birth because I was born with a condition called Leber's congenital amaurosis, LCA. It's a rare genetic disorder that causes severe vision loss from birth. I could barely see light or shadows for most of my childhood. But my parents, they didn't see a child. They saw a burden. The hall went silent. My chest heaved as I continued. They left me in a small apartment with a widow maid named Grace. No food. No plan. Just a baby with an eye disorder they didn't want. They thought they were too young, too poor to start life with a problem child. My voice cracked. But Grace didn't give up on me. I paused. The cleaner's mop handle slipped from her hand. The gardener looked at the floor, his shoulders shaking. They thought they had escaped me, I said louder now. But here we are, 25 years later. They're working under me. And today, the world will know everything. The crowd erupted in whispers. The camera zoomed in on my face. The screen behind me showed Grace, my adopted mother, tears streaming down her cheeks as she sat in the front row. Then, without warning, the camera panned to the back of the room. The cleaner's face. The gardener's face. Everyone saw them. The audience gasped. My fingers clenched the award. Mom. Dad. Do you recognize me now? The woman's knees buckled. The man grabbed her arm, his face pale. The hall buzzed like a hornet's nest. I took a deep breath, ready to deliver the last part of my speech, the one I had waited my whole life to say, the part that would change everything. But before I could speak, something unexpected happened. Something that made the room go from whispers to screams. If you're watching this, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more powerful stories like mine. My name is Emily Carter. I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, the first child of a young couple who thought they had their whole future ahead of them. They were 20 and 22, bright-eyed, hopeful, and broke. My father, Daniel Carter, was working odd construction jobs. My mother, Olivia Carter, was a waitress with dreams of becoming a nurse. But when I came along, everything changed. From the very moment I opened my eyes, I wasn't like other babies. I didn't track movement, didn't respond to visual cues. Doctors told my parents I had a rare genetic eye disorder, Leber's congenital amaurosis. It meant I would grow up with severe vision impairment, possibly near blindness. My parents were horrified. They had no money for treatment, no patience for a child who would need special care. In their minds, I was a prison sentence they hadn't signed up for. So they made a choice. A cruel one. One night, when I was barely 3 weeks old, they packed their things and left. They told the widow maid who rented a room from them, Grace Turner, that they'd be back after a short trip. They never returned. They left me, tiny, fragile, and blind, with a woman who barely had enough to feed herself. Grace had lost her husband the year before. She was scraping by cleaning houses and cooking for neighbors. She could have given me to the state, but she didn't. She swore she wouldn't let me die. She fed me from her own mouth when there was no food. She carried me on her back to clinics when I got sick. When the landlord evicted us, she took me to a one-room shack on the edge of town and continued to raise me as her own. By the time I was 10, I could feel the weight of her sacrifices. She worked double shifts to pay for my schooling. I learned to read Braille. I learned to walk with a cane. I learned to ignore the whispers of neighbors who called me the blind girl. Grace always told me, Emily, your eyes may not see like theirs, but your mind can see further than any of them. Her words became my fuel. At 15, I got a partial vision saving surgery through a charity. It didn't restore my sight completely, but it gave me enough vision to navigate without a cane. I worked like my life depended on it. By the time I graduated high school, I had the highest GPA in my district. I got a scholarship to a medical college. Still, I had questions. Who were my parents? Why did they leave me? Grace never lied. She told me the truth. They didn't want you, but you're worth more than they ever dreamed. Those words burned into my heart. I promised myself I would build a life so big, so loud, they would hear me wherever they were. Through sleepless nights and endless studying, I became a neurosurgeon, the very doctor people travel continents to see. I opened my own hospital in New York, a place where no child would be turned away because of their condition. Ironically, that same hospital hired a new cleaning staff and a gardener as part of its expansion. I didn't pay much attention to who they were. Until that day. The day of the award. The day I stood at the podium, staring at the people who abandoned me, my parents, wearing hospital uniforms. And right before I could finish my speech, something happened that would change everything. The moment hung in the air like a blade. I opened my mouth to finish my speech when a loud, desperate voice echoed from the back of the hall. Emily, please stop. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The cleaner, my mother, was pushing through the rows of seats, tears running down her cheeks. The gardener, my father, stumbled after her, his face ashen. Security moved in, but I held up my hand. Let them come, I said, my voice cold. Every camera swung toward them. The live stream comments exploded. I could almost feel the millions of people watching on their phones, holding their breath. My mother reached the stage, dropped to her knees, and clutched the edge of the podium. I didn't want to leave you, she sobbed. It was his idea. He made me do it. My father froze in the aisle, fists clenched. That's a lie, Olivia, he barked. You were the one who said you couldn't handle a blind baby. The hall erupted into shocked murmurs. Reporters scribbled furiously. Grace covered her mouth with both hands. I stared down at the two people who had created me. For years I had imagined what I would say if I ever saw them again. I'd pictured screaming, crying, even forgiving. But in this moment, I felt nothing but an icy, steady rage. You left a newborn alone, I said quietly into the microphone. You both abandoned me to die. And now you're here, trying to rewrite the story? My mother's sobs turned into wails. We were young. We were scared. We thought. You thought what? I snapped. That blindness made me less human? My father stepped forward, his jaw tight. We've been working here for months. We didn't know it was your hospital. We didn't know it was you. That's your defense? I said, my voice rising. That you didn't know? The audience was dead silent. Even the cameras seemed to hold still. Then, just as I was about to unleash everything I had kept bottled for 25 years, a voice from the back of the stage interrupted. Dr. Carter, said the hospital's chief financial officer, stepping into the light. We need to speak to you. It's urgent. I turned, irritated. Not now. But the CFO looked pale. It's about your hospital accounts. We've discovered something irregular. Millions missing. Fraudulent transfers. Someone's been stealing from your foundation. A shockwave tore through me. What? He glanced nervously at my parents. And the trail leads back to a name we didn't expect, Grace Turner. The room gasped so loudly it sounded like a storm. Grace, the woman who had saved my life, stumbled to her feet, eyes wide. What? No. I don't even know how to use a bank transfer. My head spun. Everything I had built, everything I had believed, suddenly cracked. My parents, kneeling before me. Grace, the only person I had ever trusted, accused of stealing millions. Cameras rolling, the world watching my family explode in real time. I gripped the edge of the podium to stay upright. This isn't true, I whispered. The CFO stepped closer. The authorities are already here. There's going to be an arrest. Security guards entered from both sides of the hall. Grace's hands trembled as she backed away, her eyes locked on mine. Emily, you know me. You know I'd never. I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. The guards grabbed her arms.
She didn't fight.
She just kept staring at me, like a mother waiting for her child to speak. Emily, she said softly. Tell them. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. Cameras zoomed in on my face. Millions of viewers typed comments that scrolled so fast the live stream nearly crashed. Was Grace guilty? Or was someone setting her up?
And if so, who?
I looked at my parents, at Grace, at the CFO, at the award still in my hands. This night, which was supposed to be my triumph, had turned into a nightmare. And I hadn't even begun to uncover the truth. Because what happened next would drag us all into a storm bigger than any of us had imagined. The hall felt like it had stopped breathing. All I could hear was the clinking of the award in my hand and the ragged breathing of Grace as the guards tightened their grip. Emily, she whispered again, eyes glistening. You know I didn't do this. Her voice cracked something open in me. For 25 years, Grace had been my rock, my mother, my protector. She had worked her fingers to the bone to make sure I had food, schooling, surgery, hope. And now, on the very night the world was finally seeing me, she was being dragged away in front of everyone. No, I said into the microphone, my voice shaking. Stop. Let her go. The guards hesitated. The CFO raised his eyebrows. Dr. Carter, the police have a warrant. The funds were transferred into an account under her name. There's a paper trail. Grace's knees buckled. I don't even have an account in my name, she cried. I can barely write my own signature. Someone's using me. My father suddenly stepped forward, looking panicked. We should go, Olivia, he muttered, grabbing my mother's arm. Why? I snapped. Stay right there.
He froze.
My mother looked at him strangely. Daniel, what do you know? He didn't answer. He just stared at the floor. The crowd whispered like a rising tide. Cameras zoomed in on his face. I gripped the podium, my heart hammering. Something about his silence felt wrong, like a key sliding into a lock. Dad, I said, my voice like ice.
What do you?
No. He licked his lips. It's complicated. Then uncomplicated, I hissed. He shot a look at the CFO. She was never supposed to be involved, he muttered. What do you mean? My mother asked. Daniel, what did you do? The CFO frowned. Mr. Carter, do you have knowledge of these transfers? All eyes swung to him. His hands shook. It wasn't supposed to go this far, he said. I thought if I took it back. My stomach dropped. You. He looked up at me with wild eyes. I didn't know it was your hospital. I didn't know you were my daughter. I thought I was just stealing from some rich neurosurgeon who wouldn't miss it. I used Grace's name as a shield. I never thought you'd. My mother gasped. Daniel. The room exploded in noise. Reporters stood up, shouting questions. Security moved forward. My father backed away like a trapped animal. You framed the only person who saved my life, I whispered. He held up his hands. I was going to pay it back. I swear. I lost my job. We were drowning. Stop talking, my mother hissed, tears running down her face. Grace sagged between the guards, relief and horror battling on her face. Emily, she said weakly. I stepped down from the podium, the award still in my hand, and walked toward my father. My legs felt like lead. For years I had imagined this man as a ghost, a shadow. Now here he was, flesh and blood, and a thief. You ruined my life once when you abandoned me, I said softly. Now you're trying to ruin it again. He tried to grab my arm. Emily, please. But before he could touch me, one of the guards snapped handcuffs on his wrists. My father stiffened. My mother screamed. The crowd roared. Cameras caught every second. Grace whispered my name, but I couldn't look at her. Everything around me blurred. The awards ceremony had become a courtroom. As they dragged my father toward the exit, he twisted around to look at me one last time. "You don't know everything," he shouted. "It's bigger than you think." I wasn't alone. Then he was gone, swallowed by the flashing lights outside. I stood frozen in the middle of the stage. My mother sank to the floor, sobbing. Grace clutched at the guards who still held her. The CFO barked into his phone. Somewhere deep inside me, a voice whispered, "This isn't over." Because my father's last words weren't a plea. They were a warning. Someone else was pulling strings. Someone bigger. And I had just walked into their trap. The flashing red and blue lights from the police cars outside bled into the hall through the glass doors. People were on their feet, whispering, pointing their phones at me, at Grace, and my mother curled on the floor. My father's shout, "I wasn't alone," rang in my ears like a fire alarm. I walked back up to the podium, clutching the microphone to steady myself. "Please," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm, "escort Mrs. Grace Turner to my office. No one touches her until I get there." My hospital's head of security nodded and gently steered Grace away from the guards. She looked at me, with pleading eyes. I nodded back once. It was the only promise I could make right now. Then I turned to my mother. She had stopped crying and was staring at me with something between terror and guilt. "Sit down," I told her quietly. She obeyed without a word. The live stream was still rolling, comments screaming across the screen. What a twist! Is this real? Free Grace, who is behind this? I cut the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice hard. "The ceremony is over. Please exit the hall." People hesitated, then began filing out, murmuring like a disturbed hive. As soon as the hall was empty, I took my mother by the arm and led her to my office. Grace was already there, seated, trembling but unharmed. Two of my senior legal advisors stood by the door, pale-faced. I closed it behind us and leaned against the desk. "Start talking," I said. My mother swallowed. "Emily, I swear to you, I didn't know about the money. Daniel told me he was doing side jobs. He started acting strange months ago. Secret phone calls. Cash I never saw. And then he said he had a plan to fix everything." I begged him to stop. "But who was he working with?" I cut in. She looked down at her hands. "I don't know. He only said one name. A name I recognized from the past." "What name?" My voice was sharp. Her eyes filled with tears. "Dr. Howard King." My stomach lurched. Dr. Howard King was not just a name. He was a giant in neurosurgery, a senior board member of my own hospital, my supposed mentor. He had written my first recommendation letter, given me my first big speaking slot at a conference. He was the man who told me, "Emily, you're going to change the world." Grace gasped. "That man? He used to visit your parents when you were a baby. I saw him once. They said he was going to help you." My mind reeled. Could this all have been part of some scheme stretching back to my infancy? Was King involved in my parents' decision to abandon me? Had he been using me all these years as some kind of project? I picked up the phone on my desk and called my hospital's head of compliance. "Get me every financial record linked to Dr. Howard King," I said. "Personal, business, everything.
Now."
Within minutes, encrypted files began to pour into my email. As I scrolled, my blood ran cold. Payments from shell companies. Accounts set up in Grace's name, without her knowledge. Offshore transfers timed exactly with my father's deposits. King's signature hidden behind layers of paperwork. It was all there. Grace whispered, "I told you I didn't steal anything." I reached across the desk and squeezed her hand. "I know. We're going to clear your name." Then my office phone rang. The caller ID said, "Howard King." I answered. "Dr. King?" His voice was smooth, calm, almost paternal. "Emily, I saw the live stream. What a spectacle. You framed my father." I spat. "You framed Grace. You're stealing from my hospital." He chuckled softly. "Your hospital? Emily, you built nothing without me. The grants, the licenses, the connections. Who do you think made them happen? You were blind. I gave you eyes." My grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? You've embarrassed me tonight, he said, his voice darkening. And you've interfered with something much larger than yourself. Walk away now, or everything you've built will burn. I felt my pulse in my temples. I'm not afraid of you. I think you are, he said softly. And if you're not, you will be. By tomorrow morning, your name will be in handcuffs. Goodbye, Dr. Carter. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. Grace and my mother stared at me. What did he say? Grace asked. I looked at them both. He's coming for me. A sudden crash outside the office made us all jump. My head of security burst in. Dr. Carter, the police are back. They have a warrant. This time for you. My mother gasped. Grace grabbed my hand. I stood up slowly, the weight of 25 years pressing on my shoulders. The trap had sprung. The door swung open wider, and uniformed officers filled my office. Their eyes flicked between me, Grace, and my mother. The lead officer stepped forward, hand resting on his belt. Dr. Emily Carter, he said flatly, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and embezzlement. Grace jumped up.
No.
She's the victim, not the criminal. Sit down, ma'am. Another officer barked. I took a slow breath. Running would make me look guilty. Begging would make me weak. I raised my wrists calmly. You're making a mistake. Cold metal clicked around my wrists. Cameras flashed again in the hallway as they led me out. Some journalist must have tipped them off. The hallways that once felt like mine now felt like a cage, lined with whispering staff, pointing fingers, frightened patients. I forced myself to keep my head high. Grace shouted after me. Fight, Emily. Don't let them take everything. I looked back at her. I won't, I said. They shoved me into the back of a squad car. My mother's face appeared in the window, pale and stricken. I'll get you a lawyer, she mouthed. Then the car pulled away. At the precinct, they processed me like any other suspect. Fingerprints, mugshot, holding cell. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had once scrubbed floors with Grace to pay for law books to help her fight a landlord. Now here I was, in an orange jumpsuit, accused of the very crimes my father and King had orchestrated. Hours passed before my attorney arrived, a sharp-eyed woman named Maya Bell, who had been with me since I opened my hospital. They've frozen your accounts, she whispered through the bars. King's fingerprints are all over the paperwork, but it's hidden deep. We need proof before we can move. How long can they hold me? I asked. Until arraignment tomorrow. But Emily, she leaned closer. The case they've built is ugly. They've leaked documents to the press, making it look like you and Grace were partners. They even planted messages from a fake email address that looks like yours. My stomach churned. He's dismantling me piece by piece. She nodded, but he slipped. I have a contact inside his office. Someone who's willing to testify, if we can get them out before King silences them.
Who?
She hesitated. A junior accountant. She knows where the offshore accounts are and who signed the authorizations. She's terrified. She'll only meet you. I straightened. Then get her to me. Maya shook her head. Not here. You'll have to get bail first. I don't have bail money, I said bitterly. He froze it. Her eyes flashed. But you do have someone who still believes in you. That night, as the cell door clanged shut, I lay on the thin mattress staring at the ceiling. For the first time since the award ceremony, I let myself feel it all. The betrayal, the humiliation, the fear. I thought of Grace sitting alone in my office. I thought of my father in a holding cell of his own. And I thought of Howard King, somewhere in a penthouse, sipping wine and watching the news, certain he had won. He hadn't. Not yet. At dawn, the guard opened my cell. You made bail. I stepped out, confused. In the waiting room, Grace was sitting on a hard bench, hands clasped. Beside her was my mother, clutching a checkbook. Their eyes were red but determined. We sold everything, my mother said quietly. Grace's house. My jewelry. Daniel's old tools. It's enough to get you out. I swallowed hard. Why would you, after everything? She looked at me. Because you're still my daughter. And I'm done running. Grace took my hand. Let's go bring him down. Outside the precinct, Maya pulled up in a black sedan. "The accountant will meet you tonight," she said. "She's scared, but she has a flash drive that can clear your name and bury King." I slid into the car. My wrists still bore the marks of the cuffs, but my mind was already racing. This was bigger than revenge now, it was survival. As we drove through the city, I stared out at the skyline. The hospital towered in the distance, its name, Carter Neuroscience Institute, gleaming in the sunrise. My name, my legacy, my life. "I'm going to get it back," I whispered. "And when I do, I'm going to make him answer for everything." Maya glanced at me. "Then you'd better be ready. King doesn't leave loose ends." That night, in a deserted parking garage, the accountant stepped out of the shadows, a young woman with trembling hands clutching a small USB drive. "He knows I'm here," she whispered. "He sent someone after me." Before I could answer, a pair of headlights flared in the darkness. An engine roared. A black SUV screeched around the corner and barreled toward us. "Run!" Maya shouted. The accountant screamed, fumbling with the flash drive. I grabbed her arm and sprinted for the exit. The SUV swerved, tires screaming, headlights blinding. The flash drive slipped from her fingers and skittered across the concrete. I dove for it as the SUV hurtled closer, its grille like a steel wall. In that split second, as my fingers closed around the drive, I realized this was the proof. This was the weapon that could destroy Howard King. If I survived the next 2 seconds. The concrete scraped my palms. The flash drive was cold and heavy in my fist like a small, jagged truth. Behind us, the black SUV skidded, metal whining, but Maya had already thrown herself between the accountant and the vehicle. The driver hit the brakes and cursed. 2 men jumped out and ran toward us, faces hard and dangerous. "Get down," Maya barked. We dropped behind a pillar. The men shouted and aimed, then stopped as police lights cut through the night. Sirens wailed. Someone had called ahead. My heart felt like it would jump out of my chest. A dozen officers poured into the garage. The attackers froze, then bolted. In the chaos, the accountant shoved the flash drive into my hand. Her eyes were huge and wet. "Please," she whispered. "Take it. Don't trust anyone but Maya. He will kill me if he finds me." I nodded, though my head was spinning. We moved fast. Maya escorted the accountant into a safe room at a partner law firm. I sat there, my knees shaking, the flash drive burning a hole in my palm. It had everything: transfer logs, signatures, emails from Howard King ordering the setup of shell companies, invoices with his initials, a recorded voicemail where he demanded hush money, and worst of all, a video file. King, in his own voice, laughing as he explained how he'd used my parents' fear to hide a scheme that fed his greed. I felt sick and furious at once. For 25 years he had pretended to be my mentor. He had built his empire on the backs of people like Grace, and on my broken beginning. He had used my family as pawns. And tonight, he had almost silenced the only woman who loved me. Maya looked at me. "We go public at dawn. We give this to the district attorney, major press outlets, and a live stream. We cut him off at the knees. But Emily, be ready. He will try to discredit the accountant. He will threaten anyone who speaks." I swallowed. I thought about Grace sleeping alone in my office the night before, about my mother selling whatever she could to make bail. I thought of my father's last words before they took him. "It's bigger than you think." Now I knew how big. But I also knew how small this man's courage was when faced with the truth. At 9:30, the next morning we held a press conference in a room that overlooked the city. Journalists crowded in, cameras on tripods, phones lifted. The live feed had 1 million viewers before I said anything. My hands were steady now. I had trained for moments like this in medical conferences, but this was different. This was my life, my past, and a woman who had raised me. I stepped up to the mic beside me. The accountant, a pale, shaking woman named Laura, stood with Maya. Grace sat in the front row, hands folded, eyes burning with quiet fire. My parents were at the back, smaller than I'd ever seen them.
"Good morning," I said.
"My name is Dr. Emily Carter. I run the Carter Neuroscience Institute." Cameras clicked. Today I will show you how one man used his power to hide crimes, how he framed the people who loved me, and how we will make him pay. I pushed the flash drive into the laptop. With the click, the first documents scrolled on the big screen behind me. The audience murmured as wire transfers traced from my hospital to shell companies. Then emails, signed with King's name, ordering transfers and telling staff to use other people's names. Then the video. The video was grainy at first. Then King's face filled the screen. He smiled, and there was no pretense now, just arrogance. "We can't have sentimental attachments," he said casually in the recording. "People like that complicate business. Use them as shields. Use their names. No one will check."
He laughed.
The room gasped. My stomach went cold. Reporters shouted questions. The DA's office had 2 agents in the back. Within an hour, the Department of Justice had opened a criminal investigation. By noon, King's office and homes were being searched. He tried to denounce the files as forgeries, but Laura's testimony was solid. She had access to the accounting system and the logs. The signatures matched. The offshore accounts led straight to King's companies. They arrested him at his luxury condo that evening. He did not fight. On TV, he was pale and small, the mask of power shattered. He refused to speak to the press. As the legal machine turned, the hospital set up an independent review. My name, once dragged through mud, was cleared. The board suspended King and issued a formal apology to Grace and to me for failing to protect patients and staff. Donations that had been frozen were unfrozen. The funds he stole were traced and reclaimed where possible. It would not fix everything, but it was a start. The court case moved fast because the evidence was direct and embarrassing. The trial was a media storm. In the courtroom, I sat quiet, while Laura testified in a voice that trembled but did not break. She told them about the pressure King put on her, the threats when she tried to refuse, the late-night calls promising favors for silence. My father, Daniel, took the stand too. He had been cornered and terrified of what King would do if he named him. But when he saw Grace in the courtroom, standing tall despite it all, something in him shifted. "I was part of it," he said, voice raw. "I took money. I used Grace's name. I thought I could fix things later. I was wrong. I let fear make me cruel." He looked at me as if he was asking for something impossible. "I'm sorry." His confession hurt like a new cut. It did not make what he did right, but it made the truth whole. It showed the world how fear can turn good people bad. The jury did not take long. Howard King was found guilty of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to a long prison term. In the public square, he became a cautionary tale about power and greed. After the trial, things settled into a new normal. Grace's name was cleared. They held a small ceremony at the hospital where I dedicated a wing to patients with visual disabilities and named it for her. I stood at the podium again. No glare of pretense this time, just honest light, and I thanked the woman who had raised me. "I have one life," I said, looking straight at her. "You gave me that life. This is for you." She touched my hand and smiled through tears. The crowd stood. I felt, for the first time in my life, a tide of peace wash over me. My parents left the city soon after. They found work in another state and kept their distance. My father called once, then stopped. I do not know if he forgave himself, or if he could live with what he had done. I do not pretend to understand him. I only know I do not carry his choice as my own. As for me, I rebuilt what King had tried to burn. I strengthened hospital oversight, created safeguards against financial abuse, and made sure the voices of janitors and gardeners and widowed maids were heard at the boardroom table. I met with other women who had been abandoned and hurt, and we started programs for them. My work became my revenge, quiet, steady, and useful. I did not bask in the downfall of a man. I used it. One night, years later, standing in the garden behind the hospital where the flowers were as bright as Grace's laugh, I thought about the child they left in a rented apartment. She could barely see the light, but she had learned to see truth. I wrote the final line of a speech for a small event, nothing like the one that had started the storm. It read, simply, "To Grace, for the eyes you gave me when the world closed theirs." I pinned it to the hospital wall where everyone could read it. The revenge I wanted was never about pain. It was about justice, and about building a life so full of light that no one could hide in the shadows. And even now, when the night is quiet and the city hums, I sometimes touch the scar on my wrist where the handcuffs left a mark and remember how close I came to losing everything. I remember the moment I chose to fight, because in the end, the greatest revenge was simple: to live well, to love fiercely, and to make sure no one else would be abandoned in the dark.